Hare Krishna. My name is Ujjvala Rasajna Dasi, and I will be presenting the talk on teachings of Lord Kapila. And this is from Canto 3. Okay, and these are the teachings of Lord Kapila to Mother Devahuti. So before getting into the katha, I'm going to offer my pranams. Om Ajnanati Mirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So we will be discussing about the Kapila Vacha, teachings of Lord Kapila. And as I mentioned, this is from the third canto. And here the context is Mother Devahuti, after having the daughters and then having Lord Kapila as her son, when it is about time for her husband, Kardama Muni, to leave to the forest, she realizes that she really wasted her time in the pleasure of this material worlds and the pleasure of the body. And she also realizes that she has done a great mistake. She actually says that she was cheated by Maya by not taking the saintly association of her husband, not the spiritual aspect side of her husband, but wanting to have pleasures with her husband. So she feels very bad about it. And she feels like she has lost a great opportunity to progress spiritually and to self-realize. So now she comes to Lord Kapila and she goes, "Oh Lord, my son, I am cheated. I am suffering. I am suffering with this material entanglement. So would you please help me get out of this material entanglement? And I have few questions. If you could please kindly answer them and help me get liberated from this suffering of this material world, then I would be very grateful." So that's how she approaches her son, Lord Kapila. And so the questions she asks Lord Kapila are these. First one is, "Oh Lord, what is the relationship between Jiva and Prakriti?" Again, we'll go over these answers to these questions in detail one after the other. I'm just going to read out the questions that she asks and we are going to discuss today. Okay, so the first question is, "Oh my Lord, what is the difference? What is the relationship between this Jiva and Prakriti? And what kind of bhakti do I perform to attain your lotus feet?" So please note that she wanted to get liberated. But that liberation is actually a byproduct of bhakti. And that's why you will see that her questions are more about bhakti, right? So her second question is, "What kind of bhakti do I perform to attain your lotus feet?" And then she asks about questions about the jnana, to know the tattvas, and also questions about Ashtanga Yoga, wherein a yogi realizes the Paramatma feature of the Lord inside. She asks these questions also along with bhakti in the interest of everyone else who might be interested to know those aspects also, the aspects of yoga and the Ashtanga Yoga and Jnana. But you will see that her main focus is bhakti, because that's what Lord Kapila recommends, that she follows bhakti. And that's why the fifth question is, she asks more details about bhakti yoga so she can start to practice. And two other questions after that is the nature of time and the cycle of birth and death. And those questions, those topics are related to her question, to her, the reason for questioning those particular topics is that she wanted more elaboration about the sufferings that a jiva undergoes in this material world. So knowing the sufferings, hearing about those sufferings, she's hoping that the jiva would realize that he is really trapped in this material world full of suffering. And that's how the jiva might want to know more about the bhakti to get out of this world, to get out of this suffering. So that's the reason why she asks about this topic, the nature of time, the cycle of birth and death, to make us realize, to make us jivas realize how, sorry, I'm just increasing the voice. I'm waiting for the flight. So that's the reasoning for her questions about those two topics of nature of time and cycle of birth and death. Okay, now we'll get into this questions and their answers. The first question: what is the relationship between Jiva and Prakriti? See, when Mother Devahuti is asking this question, she just doesn't come straight to Lord Kapila and say, "Okay, I have a question, Lord Kapila. Now, can you please tell me an answer about this, for this question?" Mother Devahuti, she is really wanting to practice bhakti yoga. She really wants to put an end to her suffering. So she goes to Lord Kapila and she says, "My senses are agitated and I'm falling in ignorance. I am still pervaded by this false ego of aham mameti. I have this doership and I have this proprietorship and such self-centered enjoyment. I am just being trapped by Maya with this false ego. So can you please get me out of these clutches? Why is it I am bothered by this Maya? What is the relationship between Jiva and Prakriti?" Okay, and I am asking these questions to you because you seem to be the only object of shelter to turn into. So that's the first question. And to that, Lord Kapila says, "Okay, Mata, mind is the pivot. That's the pivot for Adhyatma Yoga. Okay, so please practice bhakti with jnana and vairagya. Then this mind will be liberated and you will see that yourself as self-effulgent and transcendental." Actually, Lord Kapila says when this mind is pivot, and if one practices bhakti with jnana and vairagya, the mind will be liberated and one can see oneself as transcendental to these modes. Okay, and as an answer to her question, when she says, "I am pulled by this senses, modes, what do I do?" So Lord Kapila's beautiful answer is, when Mother Devahuti is saying, "Prasangamajaram pasham," this pasham, this attachment, prasangamajaram, very strong attachment to this material nature. What do I do? Lord Kapila's answer is, this attachment that you have for the material nature, shift this attachment to a sadhu, right? And that's how your auspiciousness will start. Then the next question would be, okay, I would like to shift my attachment to sadhu. I would like to have an association of the sadhu, hear from him. But what are the qualities of a sadhu? Right? For that, Lord Kapila says, "Titiksha karunikaha suhrudo sarvadehina ajata shatra shantaha sadhava sadhubhushanam." So the bhushanas of the sadhu and the qualities of the sadhu, how you would know that one is a sadhu is titikshava, they're tolerant, karunikaha, compassionate, right? Ajata shatrava, they don't have enmity within, not that they have no enemies outside. For Yudhishthira, he's called Ajatashattara, not because he doesn't have enemies outside, but sadhus don't have enmity inside on anybody. Right? That's the other quality. And Ajatashattara, Shantaha, they're all peaceful, always peaceful, right? But how come the sadhus are like that? How are they able to get those qualities? It's because Lord Kapila gives that hint in the next verse. It's because, sorry, I shifted this one. Yeah. Mai ananyena yogena. That's Mai ananyena yogena. This is Mai ananyena bhavena. Mai ananyena bhavena bhaktim kuruvantiye dridam. Dridam means with determination. These sadhus with determination, Mai ananyena bhavena. They fill me only in their consciousness. They're so much absorbed in my consciousness with all determination. Bhaktim kuruvantiye. Then with that absorption in me totally, they do the bhakti. That's why these qualities, they come to them by default as byproducts, right? So that's where the sadhus get their qualities from. And okay, when we meet a sadhu, okay, now what do? We want to do, offer some service to them, and we want to hear from them. Right? Bhagavatam says, right? Shushrusho shraddadhanasya vasudeva kadarchi shanmahasevaya vipta punyathitani nishevana. So when we see sadhus, we want to get their precious association and hear from them. And how do we hear? That's the next thing. Madashrayaha kadamrishtaha shrinvanti kadayanti cha tapanti vividastapanaita madkata chetasaha. Madashrayaha. Lord Kapila is saying, take my shelter. But taking Lord Krishna's shelter or Lord Kapila's shelter is not so easy because we are in modes bound by Maya and he's transcendental, free of modes. So how can we take shelter of them? And that's where the Guru comes in picture, right? He helps us take shelter of Lord Krishna. So in this case, taking shelter of Guru or taking shelter of Krishna through Guru, that's Madashrayaha. So taking shelter of Guru for Krishna, kada mrishtaha, with great relishment, kada, the Krishna kada, shrinvanti kadayanti cha, hear the Krishna katha with great relishment, and kadayanti cha, share the kada with the same relishment. And then what happens? Tapanti vivita tapanaita. The tapa, the three kinds of tapa that the jivas have, adhyatma, adi, daivika, adi, bhautika tapas. Tapanti vivita tapanaita. The jiva will not undergo those three kinds of tapas, sufferings. Why like that? Madgata chetasaha. Because they are so much absorbed in my katha and in my thoughts that they have become one with me in consciousness. Madgata chetasaha. So their absorption is so deep within me that they have become transcendental to the modes and transcendental to any sufferings that might be happening to them. That's how one should build it. Hearing the Krishna Katha, starting with Madashrayaha, taking shelter of the Guru for Krishna. So that's how the Katha is to be heard from sadhu, right? And then what happens when we hear like that? We already heard tapanti vividas tapanaita. One transcends the sufferings of this material world. But it also does something else. Satam prasangam mama virya samvido bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kathaha tajjoshanad apavarga vartmani shraddha rather bhaktir anukamishyati. When we hear this, Mama Virya Samvido, the glories, the activities of our Lord from this satam, from these sadhus, bhavanti hrutkarna rasayana kadaha. These words of the sadhu enter into our ear. Bhavanti hrutkarna rasayana kadaha. And they enter into ear and acts within our heart as a tonic, medicinal tonic. Tajoshanat. And when we are repeating this process of hearing about the transcendental activities of the Lord, about Lord Krishna, apavarga vartmani, we will be heading towards the path of liberation. Past that, Shraddha, Rathir, Bhaktir, Anukramishyati, one after the other, as we enter in the path of liberation, which is equal to Nishta in Bhakti. Next comes the Ruchi, Asaktir, right? And then Bhava Bhakti and pure Bhakti, Shuddha Bhakti. They all come one after the other, past the stage of liberation of modes. That's what happens when we hear from these sadhus, right? The whole journey of starting, from the entanglement within the modes to liberation from the modes and towards the Ruchi Asakti, Bhava and Shuddha Bhakti just happens from hearing from these sadhus. Because they tell us what bhakti is, how to do it, right? We know what to do and what not to do in bhakti when we hear from them. And when we follow those instructions and do the bhakti process diligently like that, this is what would happen to the devotees. Beautiful journey. And so this kind of bhakti, where senses and mind are dedicated to Lord Krishna at the level of spontaneous attraction of bhava, which is bhava bhakti, that is even superior to the liberation. That's what Lord Kapila is saying. So that kind of bhava bhakti, that can be attained through the sadhana bhakti or through the raga bhakti. By either of these routes, we can get to that bhava bhakti, where there is spontaneous bhava to the Supreme Lord. And that's how we get to the bhava bhakti. And these bhava bhaktas, where are they? They're absorbed completely in thought of Supreme Lord, and they don't want any pleasures of Swarga and upper planetary system. And but they are having the greatest pleasure that they can get, even from Swarga or upper planetary system, because Supreme Lord is the source of all pleasures. What to speak of these material pleasures? So when these bhava bhaktas are with the Supreme Lord, they are getting the highest pleasure. And also, they are in relationship with the Supreme Lord as a son, as a friend, like that. So they get all the, as a friend, as a servant also. In Vaikuntha, they are like servant, mainly. So they get all the opulences that Lord enjoys, right? So there, the opulences are undestroyable, as opposed to the opulences that are present in this material world. So in this way, a bhakta is not losing any of the enjoyment or pleasures. He's actually getting more enjoyment and more opulences than more pleasure and opulences in the transcendental realm than one could get in this material realm. Okay. So that's about bhakti. Next, to the second question of Mother Devahuti, of what when she asks about jnana to understand the tattvas, Lord Kapila explains about this Sankhya philosophy, where Purusha combines with Pradhan, like unmanifested material nature, and then Prakriti comes out of it, And then Prakriti turns to Mahat Tattva. That's undifferentiated. That is the universal consciousness, right? And that Mahat Tattva turns into, from Mahat Tattva, from the ignorant part of the Mahat Tattva comes the Ahankara. And from that Ahankara comes Sattva, Rajas, Tamo gunas, right? And from Sattva comes the principal demigods and the mind. And from Rajaguna comes the intelligence. And then Gnanendriyas, Karmendriyas. And from the ignorance comes the Panchamahabhutas and Tanmatras, right? That's the one aspect of Jnana that Lord Kapila gives. And then, so he tells that, when this Jiva gets absorbed in these modes, then that's when the false ego comes, as we have just seen in the chart, right? And that's how this false ego, or the Jiva, gets entrapped in samsara. And after that, he gives some information about how to practice. He gives some information about those people who practice bhakti for the sake of jnana, so they can attain Brahma Jyoti. Right? That's Bhakti Mishra Jnana. After that, he speaks about bhakti, using bhakti for realization of Paramatma. That's Bhakti Mishra Yoga, right? Where one realizes the super soul aspect of the absolute truth. Next. Yeah, then Mother Devahuti, she listens to all this, about these aspects of jnana, where the Purusha interacts with Pradhan and Prakriti and all these modes come out. She hears about all that and she goes, "Oh Lord, see the Jiva, it got trapped in karma because the attachment to Prakriti is so eternal, right? Since Jiva's attraction to Prakriti is eternal, then where is the chance that this Jiva can come out of this trap of Prakriti? Would you please explain me?" That's what Mother Devahuti questions. Then Lord Kapila says, "Yes, wonderful, wonderful question. What one needs to do is, again, hear from the sadhus. And that's where the detanglement happens. Hear from the sadhus about the futility of lording over the material nature. Hear from the sadhus about how to practice bhakti. Okay. Next. So we have discussed until Jnana, and now we'll talk about the Ashtanga Yoga, right? So just going to try to minimize this Zoom. Yes, right, Ashtanga Yoga. So when Mother Devahuti asks Lord Kapila to please explain about Ashtanga Yoga, Lord Kapila is giving the information about how to practice it. Ashtanga Yoga is about realizing the Paramatma aspect of the absolute truth, the Paramatma sitting in our hearts. That's the Ashtanga Yoga. So there, for as with any yoga, we have to withdraw our mind from the senses, right? Same thing here. Withdraw the mind from the senses, and then we have to be established in the mode of goodness, the steadiness in our body, mind, speech, and intellect, and then worship the deity. This is there in Ashtanga Yoga too, worship the deity, right? And then withdrawing the mind is like what? Pratyahara. Right? We first do the yama, niyama, the do's and don'ts regulations, and then we do the yogas, the, the asanas, right? So we can sit for the meditation, the Ashtanga Yoga for a long time. That's what the yogis do. And then they do the pranayama, the breathing exercise, though, so they can just breathe only when needed, occasionally, so they don't get disturbed from their meditation. Right? After that comes pratyahara. We have to withdraw the mind from anything external. That's when the internal journey begins for them. Right? And for somebody to come to this aspect of not moving their body for whatever days or months, and just breathe every now and then and focus their mind internally is just a part of the Ashtanga Yoga. And that was the yoga in the previous ages. But this is the process of Ashtanga Yoga though. Pratyahara is to withdraw the mind from any contemplation of the external objects. And then the focusing the mind within the focusing the mind on the Lord in the heart, right? Bhagavatam says, here Lord Kapila says, the mind has to be focused on the Bhagavan's pastime in the Lord. It gives the details of how Ashtanga Yoga is done, how each limb of the body needs to be focused, and finally, the how the Paramatma moves, the pastimes of the Lord. These are all, that is all happens in the Ashtanga Yoga. And then the yogi will be in relationship with him. And by this time, the yogi is unaware of any externals or body clothing, etc. And by this time, the Lord takes charge of the yogi's body, right? And needless to say, a yogi who has gone to such depth sees all living entities equal, seeing Paramatma in all the living entities. That's Ashtanga Yoga. And in Ashtanga Yoga, these are the beautiful points I thought I'll just put forward. The benefits of different aspects of Ashtanga Yoga, how they help the Ashtanga Yogis are. When they restrain the senses, they get free from material association. And when they concentrate the mind, they are free from sinful activities. When they do the pranayama, their physiological conditions are treated. When they meditate on Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are free from modes. Please note, all these things are automatically achieved in Bhakti Yoga. By the stage of Nishtha and Ruchi itself, a Bhakti Yogi is almost freed from most influence of the modes, and what to speak of Asakti and Bhava and further stages. So just to let you know that a Bhakti will be doing all this, will be attaining all this that is said in Ashtanga Yoga and much more. He attains much more than what can be done in Ashtanga Yoga. Okay, now coming to the next topic of more details of Bhakti Yoga. So far, Mother Devahuti have heard from Lord Kapila about something about Bhakti, something about Jnana, and something about Ashtanga Yoga. And now she wants to know more about Bhakti Yoga because this is the path that Lord Kapila has recommended to her so she can attain the lotus feet of the Lord quickly, right? So in this Bhakti Yoga, one thing we want to know, anybody wants to know, even before they practice Bhakti Yoga is, Bhakti is pure, transcendental. But when we start the practice, we, the practitioners, we have many modes in us. Some of us have more of ignorance, some more of passion, and some they may have more goodness than the other two. So when we are practicing pure bhakti, by the time it comes out of us, it looks contaminated because we have contaminated pure bhakti with our modes. So in that way, if we look at it, this topic, we can divide the bhakti yogis, the performance of bhakti, into three categories. One category would be those who are performing bhakti in a mode of passion. And please remember, bhakti is pure, transcendental. And it's only because of the modes in the practitioner, the bhakti appears different, as one in goodness, one in ignorance, one in passion, like that. Okay? So when somebody has more of ignorance in them and they're practicing bhakti, the ignorance is the tendency to hurt others. They have no compassion. See, when I'm filled with a lot of ignorance, I don't feel like being sensitive to others. That's the effect of ignorance. So when I am performing bhakti in that mode where I'm not sensitive to others, where I don't mind hurting others, then it means I'm performing bhakti in ignorance, like that. And if I am wanting something other than the Lord, if I'm wanting to get recognition from others or things, possess something from others, name, fame, adoration, recognition, anything external like that, then it is said that I am performing bhakti in mode of passion. Pratak drik. Pratak is separate. Drik, vision, right? So my vision is separate from the Lord. That happens in passion when I'm in mode of passion. I want something separate from the Lord. And this pratak drik, that I want something separate from the Lord, can happen in goodness also. The only difference is when I'm in passion, I want something external, something from external other than the Lord, right? It could be things, people, or anything related to people, like recognition from the people, like that. So if I'm wanting anything external and practicing bhakti, that's mode of passion. But if I'm wanting liberation, not the Lord himself, not the service of the Lord, but liberation from the modes, that is bhakti in mode of goodness. So in mode of goodness, it's not that the practitioner is hurting anybody, they're not in ignorance. And it's not that they want fame, recognition, or things or opulences, because they're not in passion. But they want relief from suffering. They want relief from modes, right? So that is bhakti in mode of goodness. That is better than the ignorance and passion, but still inferior to pure devotion, where the practitioner wants only the satisfaction of the Lord. They don't care if they are suffering or not. They don't care about liberation from suffering. But what they want is the happiness of the Lord. That's pure devotion. Okay? So these are different performers of bhakti. And next comes, what to do to actually get to the pure devotion. What to do to make our bhakti shuddha, not tainted with ignorance, right? Tama or passion, rajoguna. So what to do to get to the Shuddha Bhakti? In the initial stages in sadhana bhakti, these are the things that Lord Kapila suggests us, recommends us, instructs us to do. Right? What do we do? Swadharma without profit. Do our occupation without expectation for the profit, and don't do excessive violence in your devotional activities, no extreme austerities. And perform the deity worship so we can treat everybody the same, because Lord Kapila says that the same deity is present in everybody's heart. And the reason to perform the deity worship is to make us aware that the deity is present in everybody's heart. Right? So that's what Lord Kapila says. And Lord also instructs that Mahatam Bahumanena, respect the spiritual authorities. And Adhyatmika Anushravanat, follow the instructions of the spiritual authorities, the gurus. Ari Sangena, have the satsang, sadhu sangha. And Nirahang Kriyaya, discard the false ego, okay? Devoid of false ego. Then Dinanam Anukampaya, show compassion to who is wanting to practice spiritual life, who are entangled materially. And Maitreya Atmatulyeshu, to your friends, to your peers, just give the friendship. Offer friendship to your equals. Offer compassion to your not necessarily inferiors, but offer, because we don't want to see ourselves as superior to anyone. So offer compassion to those who are in need of it, who wants to come to the spiritual life, and offer guidance to them. Right? Dinanam Anukampaya. Then Yamena Niyamena Cha. So follow the rules and regulations not for the formal sake of it. Know why we are following that rules and regulations. Keep the object, the destination, the goal in front of them, in the mind all the time. And keeping that object, the goal in mind, perform the rules and regulations, not just blindly do the rules and regulations. See how those rules and regulations are helping us to go to the desired objects, and then performing it accordingly with introspection. That is Yamena Niyamena. Then Nama Sankirtana, of course, take the holy names. And Arjavena is straightforward dealings. It's simple thinking. So if one practices these things, then one's bhakti, Shuddha Bhakti, comes out, instead of being tainted by Rajas Guna and Tamo Gunas, the lower gunas. So that's about the detailed aspects of bhakti. And the final points in bhakti, very important points in bhakti. The major obstacle in bhakti yoga is we tend to see that the Lord is only in the deity, but we tend to be insensitive and ignore the people around, the devotees around. So in the process, we disregard them, and worse than that is we hate them and criticize them. So if we think we are doing bhakti while disregarding the devotees or having any kind of insensitivity or hatred towards them and criticizing them, what to speak of disregarding, what to speak of criticizing, right? That is really a gross anartha. Just disregarding in one's mind itself is the start of the anartha. But if it is being expressed out as hatred and criticism, it means it has gone too far. In that case, what we are practicing bhakti is not actually bhakti. It can be called as neophyte bhakti, but the danger of it is we can just lose the taste and faith in bhakti if we are still at that step. So it's very important to realize that, as Lord Kapila says here, Lord Kapila says that we have to realize that the presence of Lord in everyone. And that's why he's recommending worshipping of the deity also, to realize the presence of Lord in everyone. That way, when we are able to treat the deities in the same manner as we do the deity worship, then we will be able to overcome the obstacles in bhakti. That's what Lord Kapila says in this chapter. And after that, he explains about the gradation of jiva. We're starting with the inanimate object, and then with increased consciousness, sensitivity, like that, to the end where the gradation ends with pure devotee. Okay, so the jiva can start their journey from sankuchita chetana, very contracted consciousness, as in plants, right? From there, the journey goes to expand the consciousness from sankuchita chetana to, the budding consciousness, and then vikasita chetana and purna vikasita chetana, completely blossomed consciousness. That's pure devotee. So that's the gradation of the consciousness, and that is reflected in the gradation of jiva, the external bodies also, starting from inanimate object to the pure devotee. That's also discussed here in Bhakti Yoga. And coming to the very last two topics. As he addresses the seventh point, to describe the cycle of birth and death, I'm just going to briefly touch base these points, otherwise it may become too long. So what we have discussed so far is really important for us in terms of practicing bhakti. But these last two topics are to realize how futility is to lord over the material nature, because they're just so temporary and they're full of suffering. Nevertheless, I'll go through the points quickly of what Lord Kapila mentioned in these topics. So, if I go back to the first slide, this is what we are discussing now. Actually, we have just discussed the more details of Bhakti Yoga, and comes the nature of time that we did not discuss. So let's go to that. Yeah, nature of time. So different aspects of time. Time is the other aspect of Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when it is seen as something different from the Supreme Controller, the Lord, then the element of fear, the bhayam, comes from within us. But when we look at the time and the changes that are happening around because of the time, as a part of the arrangement or as the energy of the Supreme Lord, then the bhayam does not come. Bhayam dvitiya abhiniveshat syat. So when we forget that something is not related to the Lord, when we forget the factor that everything is related to the Lord, that's when the fear element comes. Same with the time. So if we look at it as something different from the Lord, bhinna drisham, then bhayam comes. Okay. Next one is avyaya. It is infallible, anadi. It has no beginning, and akilashraya, it's the shelter of everything. And kalayatam prabhu, transformation of material manifestations also happen because of the time. And it's also said that because of the fear and order of time, the demigods, they do their job, right? Managing the universal affairs. And sky provides the space because of the order of time. Fire burns, earth doesn't sink, rivers flow and oceans do not flow. Trees give the fruits, creepers give the flowers. All these dharmas are being performed by each object because of the order of the time. Right? That's the nature of the time. And the last topic, cycle of birth and death. Here, two slides in this. Actually, in cycle of birth and death, the jiva's entrance into the womb of mother, the growth and suffering in the womb, and the jiva's prayers in the womb, and the sufferings of the jiva when it comes outside the womb, and when the living entity grows big and starts to associate with the people, the kinds of bad association, degrading association that a person gets, and all this is explained in the 31st chapter, right? And even before that, in the 30th chapter, the life and death of the materialist is explained, right? There it is said that it explains about how time destroys everything that a materialist acquires, right? And the amazing thing is, even if the jiva is going to the lowest species, abominable species like pig, even in the hellish conditions also, the jiva tries to adjust to the situation and try to feel that it is comfortable and it's okay to be like this. Like that story of Indra, where he becomes pig and doesn't want to come back to the Indraloka when Brahma comes to him and asks to come back. He says, no, I'm pretty fine here. See, I have that pig wife, I have the pig children, and I am. Hare Krishna. This is a continuation of the previous one. Battery died on me, I have to change that. So we were discussing about the cycle of birth and death as an answer to Mother Devahuti's last request to explain about the futility of lording over the material nature, right? So we've discussed about the jiva's entrance, growth and suffering in the womb. These are the points that are mentioned in Lord Kapila's teachings in the chapter, 31st chapter. And then after this, we went to this prior slide. That's the topics that Lord Kapila discusses in the 30th chapter. This is after the jiva is born, the life and death of a materialist. That's the topic in the 30th chapter. So here the interesting points are, Lord Kapila brings it to our attention of how the life of a materialist is just going in waste, because the time is destroying everything that a materialist has accumulated over a period of time, right? And the amazing thing about the conditioned souls, be they be in any bodies, in a human body or in a pig body, any body, any abominable body like pig, which feeds on the waste, right? So that story of Indra and Brahma, right? So where that Indra becomes a pig, and then he is just in the sewage eating the waste, and he thinks it is very nice there, and he is just making himself happy. As the Bhagavatam is speaking, that the amazing thing about all the jivas is, wherever they are, how abominable a body they are in, they just make themselves happy there. Like Indra is making himself happy there. He thinks it's okay to eat that sewage there, the waste there. He did not think that is okay. He actually thought it is very good, that he's really enjoying what he's eating, the waste, the sewage, the stool there. And he was very much satisfied having his pig wife and his pig children and pig life and pig food. It's just amazing. It's just amazing how we, the jivas, are trapped. Not only trapped in this material modes, material bodies, but trapped in this feeling of being happy, not just being okay, but being happy, even being in very abominable condition and in suffering conditions also. We do not want to change much about that. And that's an amazing thing. It's sad, very unfortunate, but that's something amazing that we, the conditioned souls, are put in. So when Lord Brahma comes and informs Indra that that he's in a big body, he's actually Indra, so he has to come back to Indraloka. Then the pig, the Indra who became the pig, says, no, I'm very much fine here. I am happy with what I am here. Which Indra are you talking about? No, I'm not coming anywhere. So that's how the pig, the Indra, responds. Finally, of course, when Lord Brahma takes away everything, one after the other, children and wife and everybody, then the pig, the Indra and the pig, realizes where he was trapped, and of course he goes back to Indraloka. But it is amazing how we are just put into that illusory happiness in whatever body we are in. And we also have the deep-rooted attraction for family, right? And there is constant anxiety to maintain them. And as we put our time, as the conditioned souls put our time and energy, the whole life, in being anxious and maintaining the family, Lord Kapila says at the end of the life, they feel like they're unsuccessful in maintaining them, and they end up with old age and death. So that's life of the materialist, of a conditioned jiva, of a jiva that is pulled by the modes. And in the same chapter, Lord Kapila explains about the post-death experience, how a person passes stool and urine at the time of leaving the body, and after the soul is separated from the body, the way to the hell, and then hellish punishments, and how many lower births they have to take, after coming out of that hellish punishments, and then at the end reborn as a human being again. So birth of a human being is very precious, very precious. So that's about the cycle of birth and death. And the last slide here from the 32nd canto says about different kinds of activities, entanglement in karmic activities, okay, versus the bhakti. So karma kandis and sakama karma performers, they worship the forefathers, pitras, and devas, and they go to moon, and of course they have to come back again to the earth after they expire their fruits of the sacrifices they have done. And the detached workers, they travel through the path of sun and they go to the body of Mahavishnu. The Hiranyagarbha worshippers, they remain in Satyaloka for that lifetime of Brahma. And at the end, when the Brahma leaves the body, then they enter into the body of Mahavishnu. That's for the Hiranyagarbha worshippers. But for the Bhakti Yoga, Bhakti Yogis, right? The destination we know for the Bhakti Yogis, that is Vaikuntha, a place of where there is no anxiety, right? So if you look at it, by bhakti, goals of other paths are achieved, and detachment is common to all practitioners. And all practitioners of different paths where they aim at liberation and realization of Bhagavan. So in all these practices of yoga, the detachment is common. Okay. That is the end of this Katha, touching on different topics of Mother Devahuti's questions and Lord Kapila's answers. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.